Welcome to the Driven to Succeed Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Olson. And today I wanted to go through what the market has as a lot of people frozen, waiting on rates, waiting on prices, waiting on inventory. There's all kinds of excuses right now why people are waiting. But what if waiting is actually costing you wealth? And that's usually what happens in mortgage and real estate, and specifically in real estate. Today, Leslie Dahlen is here, joins us to talk about why there's almost always a strategic solution in real estate if you know where to look. Leslie, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Leslie, it was nice that we got to work together on a transaction.
Yes.
I was on the buy side.
Yes.
And we got that deal done. You had another tough, deal going on, which we still have going on.
Mm-hmm.
But we are able to find a solution for that.
Mm-hmm.
And we do get creative at these times. And that's why when I invited you to come on the show, you have a lot of experience in real estate.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking forward to this podcast today because I do want to get that information out there. You work with a lot of buy, sell. So like people
Yes.
buying and selling and
Yes.
talk about some of those things that you've run across, what we need to do. Like the first thing is buy before you sell, right?
Right. Yeah. One of the things I always ask my clients first off is which would be worse to them, to find the perfect house and not be able to buy it because they hadn't sold theirs, or to sell their house for everything that they wanted and then not have a place to go into. And so people are usually more afraid of one or the other of those things, or more excited about one or the other of those things. Like, I love my home. I don't have no intention of moving unless I find the next thing. So oftentimes from a timing perspective, we're out searching for homes, looking for the perfect thing. And then as soon as we find it, we have to scramble to sell the other one. So, but depending on, and a lot of people, one of the things that it really makes it interesting in this market is that many, many people have a ton of equity in their homes right now.
Right.
And so that gives you a lot of power to be able to utilize that for the next one. It's one of the things that I was excited about hearing what you were doing with your clients. The buyers that bought my seller's home that you represented, they were in a multiple offer situation and they won because they were able to make a non-contingent offer, but they still had a house that they needed to sell.
Correct.
It's just that you used a creative buy before you sell bridge loan financing product that gave them the chance to buy non-contingent, to make the offer that they wanted. They could make the price offer that they wanted, and they could do the terms that they wanted and still win out over somebody else and still have time to market their home appropriately, to not have to just rush to lower the price to get it sold in a month, but to be able to wait a few months or do whatever they needed to in order to get the price that they wanted on their home. So
yes, that is, one of the best ways we can do that right now is using the bridge loan financing.
Mm-hmm.
Or, we've had people take home equity lines of credit out. On the financing end, on our end, we just have to make sure that they can qualify for both.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's so much equity in these homes out there now, there's some other products, and we're finding, and like kind of getting creative with our other clients.
Mm-hmm.
There's some programs, there are some new companies coming out that are actually, you got to fit in the parameters, so not everybody fits in the parameters, but if you can get it, there's some new crazy things coming out because there's so much equity, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're like, okay, well, we can do it. You can still sell it. Like we've had a couple companies who are like, we're gonna put this number on it, and we're gonna buy it first, buy your house, not the new one,
Mm-hmm.
or there's the vice versa. We'll buy the new house. Once you get that sold, then we can refinance it into your name. So there's a lot of different creative ways to do that. Buy before you sell.
Mm-hmm.
And there's sometimes it just doesn't work that way, but that's where we really look to see how, what do we have for equity?
Yeah.
What do we have? Like, how can we make this work? So we can maximize both sides of that transaction.
Right. And I think a lot of times people forget, like, it's just all about the numbers. So people will look at a bridge loan and go, oh, well, it's going to cost me this much money, or I'm going to have these two loans. But if you look at what the cost is versus what you're able to sell, how much more would you have to sell your home for, or how much less before it made up that difference?
Right.
So if you're able to sell your home for 30,000 more because you had an extra month to market it and it cost you $5,000 to do that,
Mm-hmm.
aren't you ahead?
Right.
So,
Right.
so that's the way I look at that.
Yeah, I've been pretty fortunate too to take out, like, we just start moving things around.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, you have $180,000 in equity in your home. You
Mm-hmm.
want to put 20% down. That 20% is only going to be 110,000 with closing costs,
Mm-hmm.
right? And looking at $500,000 home, so we have some extra money. You have a car loan that's 36 grand left at a $600 payment. We can pay all of that off.
Mm-hmm.
And now that bridge loan isn't a big factor anymore. So we
Mm-hmm.
start getting, looking at that because, the one thing people worry about is like, well, now I got to carry 2 payments.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's some of them out there now where you don't even have to carry that payment,
Mm-hmm.
depending on what the loan program is. But being able to, like, okay, well, we're going to pay off these 2 at the same time as we're putting the money down. So now you really don't have that extra money out of pocket outside of that bridge loan and your mortgage and the new mortgage.
Mm-hmm.
So get very creative, looking at those ways, and it really does help because over the years, all I've ever seen is, like, if we're contingent and we have to sell that home,
Mm-hmm.
at the same time in these markets in the last 7 years, 8 years, it's just really hard.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's easier in December,
Yeah.
but in January to get an accepted offer, but in the spring, summer, fall, it's really hard to get your offer accepted when you're contingent on that sale.
Mm-hmm.
Another creative way is we do 2-1 buy downs.
I love those.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I do too, because it really does help the buyers, specifically when we're in a higher rate environment and rates are trending downwards,
Mm-hmm.
or, like we expect the rates to come down over the last couple of years. 2023 when rates hit 8%,
Mm-hmm.
and now we're refinancing all those people in the 6s or even 5s at the moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but they did a 2-1 buy down, so they actually got a 6% rate the first year.
Yep.
7% the next year, and now we're refinancing it into that lower rate. What do you see on the seller side when they say, like, how do you explain it to your sellers?
So if you're trying to sell a home and it's difficult and you've done all of the things to present it the best, you've got all the photography and staging, all the things. When it comes down to it, it generally comes down to price. If you can't sell, you have to reduce your price, which that a lot of times that really is the case. But in this environment, buyers are not as concerned about the price. They're kind of used to how high prices have gotten. They're concerned about their monthly payment.
100%.
They don't want to give up their 3% rate in order to have a 6% rate. So as a seller, if you offer to buy down their rate 2 percentage points, so now if rates are 6, that means someone's going to get a 4% rate their first year. We're almost back to what everybody's expecting they would like to have. And then up to 3 the second year and before. And that gives 2 more years for rates to kind of correct and maybe refinance in that time anyway.
Right.
But if as a seller, it costs you $20,000 or in closing costs, you might come out better than having to reduce your home price 25 or 30,000.
Yes. So that's where I really stress talking to people that are struggling with their house to sell is, maybe they started too high, depending on the market or whatever it is, and they're struggling. And it's like, well, what did the builders do in the last few years? The builders always are showing a low rate.
Yes.
Right? They're showing a 4.99 rate.
Yes.
Now they can, because they will use their own money to buy down the rates, and it's not part of the transaction. There's a whole thing on that, but that's how they're selling the homes, right? Because it really does come down to, well, what can I afford from the payment standpoint per month? That's number one, right? Right. It's not so much as a house that's $550,000 or $700,000. It's how much can I afford that payment to be? And you're coming from the people that have a previous home at a 2.5% interest rate or 3.25%, or whatever it is, and that payment's like $2,000. Now they're stepping up the next home, and they're like, my God, it's double,
Right.
so it's scary. So having that 2-1 buy down that does help a lot. And a lot of times people are, if they're making that next move, they're a lot of times there's a promotion coming up, life's changed, so that affordability does really help.
Hmm.
Um, assumable mortgages. So I'm going to ask you what your thoughts are on that and here's why, right? I don't have a ton of experience with that because, when we do an FHA loan for my clients, right,
Hmm.
and they go to sell it, a lot of times that loan was sold off.
Hmm.
I no longer have it. So
Hmm.
the assumable, you have to go to that lender.
Correct.
So have you done any recently at all?
A few of them.
Yes.
So, I mean, the great thing is that if anyone got a loan that was an FHA loan or a VA loan since 1988, those are automatically assumable. There is a trick to finding one with somebody who bought it during a low interest rate environment, and finding someone who has a low interest rate and a level of equity that you're able to buy out. So sometimes they don't work because the loan is too low versus the purchase price. So if somebody bought a house, say there's a $500,000 house somebody bought in 2000 and what was a good year? Anyways, bought in the you know bought a few years ago, and when it was in the 3% rate, and so now they only have a mortgage of 200,000 on it at 3%. But in order to buy this house, you're going to need to bring in 500,000.
Right.
So you can assume the 200, but then it's still going to be very expensive on that 300.
Right.
So what's perfect is if you have an assumable loan where maybe it's a $400,000 house and they still owe 300,000 on it.
Right.
And they have a low enough rate that you can get into that low rate and then just cover the difference. So if you're selling another home, maybe you have that amount. That's when that formula works the best. There have been times when now there are a number of lenders who are stepping up with second mortgages. They're usually more expensive. I mean,
Right.
But sometimes it's a short-term strategy. So
Right.
sometimes it's okay, we can get into this. We have this great first mortgage at a low rate. We can have this high interest rate. But what we're going to do is when we buy this next home, we're going to do X and X repairs. We're going to refinance it a year down the road and pay off that.
Pay off that second.
Pay off that second, or something to that effect.
Sure.
If it's a short-term type of strategy.
How have you seen as far as like the time of transaction for that assumable?
They really do take a long time. A lot of times they're, 90 days or something because you're dealing with a bureaucratic and all kinds of paperwork. It really depends. I've seen some go quicker than that but it just depends on the bank and the lender. And I don't think there's any rhyme or reason to it. I don't think for sure, but so it's much more helpful if you have willing sellers, if you have people where you have good communication on both sides, and the agents understand it, and sellers are, one of the ones we had recently been working on, it was a situation where sellers were waiting for a visa to move out of the country. And so they were okay with the time frame getting extended, and the buyer was okay waiting in order to get the right rate.
Right.
So in those circumstances, that's when
Sure.
When you have flexibility on closing time frame, it's the best.
So the one thing that I'm taking away from this is the communication and the understanding and being able to explain to your clients what this is going to take, right?
Yes, for sure.
Perfect. Seller financing, subject to, or like, have you done many contract for deeds?
Yep. Yeah. All of that stuff.
Yes.
So, and sometimes those are also work through strategies right now. So a lot of times sellers are willing to do a contract for deed in the short term, but they want to have a 3-year balloon. They want to have time, so a lot of times it's figuring out what the strategy is for now, but then what do we see coming up in the future that's going to change that?
Sure.
So generally with a contract for deed, you still amortize it over 30 years like you would with a mortgage. And so the payments are normal payments. Generally sellers, traditionally would want to have a pretty big down payment. But again, depending on a lot of times you can fit the puzzle pieces. It's a matter of knowing what the seller is hoping to accomplish, what the buyer is hoping to accomplish, and, figuring it out so that both sides win.
Sure.
So I had a really, really interesting one recently where I came into it to represent a seller who he had bought with a contract for deed before I knew him. And so, but he was in a position where he needed to sell that home that had the contract for deed on it. It was a pretty expensive property. And so we tried traditional means of selling and tried a whole bunch of different things. And in the end, we used the contract for deed as a selling point. So I was able to find a buyer who wanted seller financing and was able to come in and buy out that underlying contract. So it was subject to the existing financing, which happened to be contract for deed financing on that property. So it was a lot of moving pieces, but everybody won in the end. Contract holder still kept getting paid. Buyer was able to finance a property with very favorable terms and keep their other investments in place. And seller was also able to move on from that. So
again, creative and being able to get through that. There's a lot of moving parts to that, or components to it. The 2-move strategy, explain that a little bit more.
Sure. Well, so many times I always, when I first start working with any clients, I always try to just ask them questions. What is causing you to move right now? What are you hoping to? What do you see in the future? And some people have different ways of looking at things. A lot of people have, we're looking for our forever home and this big in this location, or, we're just getting into our first home or getting into our next home. So, but a lot of people right now who, especially when they have a home to sell, and especially when it was a low interest rate, are waiting until it's a better time to buy or the interest rates are lower. But they can see that they've gained a whole bunch of equity since they bought this house. Well, a lot of times the move is not waiting 5 years until you've saved up money. Why not just create that equity with another move? So sometimes you see this is how people over a lifetime succeed well in real estate. You buy something, you live in it for a few years, you have a bunch more equity, then you use that for a down payment on the next one and buy a bigger house, et cetera, et cetera. And so, you can do that in a short term too. We've had clients who have bought, I've worked with a lot of flippers, people who have bought in order to sell, but I've had buyers that have bought a home to live in and then decided 7 months later that they wanted to move.
Right.
So there's nothing that says, traditionally,
Sure.
I think they used to say you lived in your home an average of 5 to 7 years or something like that. I actually read a statistic that number has gone up in the last 2 years because people are waiting. But if you had equity, you eventually want to move up. Well, what if you were able to buy? Your equity is always increasing at kind of the same rate. So if you have a home that's worth $300,000 and it goes up 5% a year, that's your $15,000 that you made. But if you had a house that was twice that, then it would be going up twice as big, $30,000 a year, et cetera, et cetera. So if you don't get the benefit of your equity until you use it, until you sell, until you employ it someplace else.
Right.
And so I've had people who, are like, oh, well, maybe I should buy another house. Even one that you can add equity to, like, hey, I've remodeled my kitchen in this house. I see how much more valuable it made my home. Maybe I should buy another one, remodel the kitchen, and then sell a couple years down the road. And
yeah, that is a very good strategy because like you said, people wait. I've heard every excuse as well. Like, oh, this isn't the right market, or this isn't, we want that single family home with this price, but it's too expensive. It's like, okay, well, what if, on the first time buyer's range, what if we did find a town home for you that's more affordable, or just a smaller home overall that's more affordable, with the money down? Because a lot of people, what I've seen too is, it's not as common anymore, but it still is where there's a myth out there that you have to have 20% down, right?
Sure.
And it's like, well, it's going to take me forever to get 20% down. Well, yes, specifically if you're talking $500,000-$600,000, right? It's very hard to save for that. So the 3% down, the 3.5%, or VA loan 0, you have all these different programs, but what we've been able to show, or I can explain to other clients, and here's what my past clients did. They purchased a home, 3% down. They did this and this into it, and here we are 3 years later. They are closer to buying their forever home now, or the next home, right?
I know. I'm cool with dream homes. Forever homes, I think that's way too long of a commitment for a house.
Right. Right. There you go. I don't think, my personal opinion, it's like, I don't look at my home as a forever home,
No,
right?
right.
It's just like,
Nope.
so a forever home, you have to come from like, okay, my family all lives right here. My job isn't going anywhere,
Hmm.
and this is the home. Yeah, maybe it is a forever home, but most of the time that's not the case. Um,
One of the things you brought up, I just want to point this out, like with first time home buyers, you really, with these FHA and with down payment assistance, you can get into a house for $1,000 down.
mhm,
That's less than you can get into a rental. Generally, if you're renting something, you have to pay first month's deposit as a security deposit plus first month's rent. So even people who have never owned before, there's a benefit from not waiting, particularly if it's gonna, and rents have gone up so much. Like we're back to being able to say it costs more to rent than to buy,
correct.
with these types of financing programs that are out there. So when you look at the numbers, it's like, what? Oh, I can't afford it because I don't have 20%. Well, wait a minute. What can you afford for a monthly payment? What were you going to pay for this? If you could buy this house for the same thing that you're renting this one, doesn't it make sense? So,
Correct. I mean, if you're talking, okay, it's going to be $2,000 a month, for rent,
mm-hmm,
and you get that first and second payment that you have to have, that's $4,000 right there.
mm-hmm,
Minnesota housing,
mm-hmm,
$1,000 down, and
mm-hmm,
maybe we have to ask sellers to pay some closing costs, but we can get that 3.5% down. Now you own a home and
mm-hmm,
building equity. Um, and so yeah, that it does. It makes
mm-hmm,
a giant difference. There's, some of my best clients, reach out to them on their birthdays or whenever, and they're just super happy. Like, you changed my life. There's across the range. Like, I never thought I could buy a house.
yeah,
Like, I didn't think I could get this, and these are people that are in their 40s and 50s
mm-hmm,
that, like,
mm-hmm,
and you can get them in their first house, and the average age of a homeowner has gone up considerably recently, but there are so many programs, like, as SWBC Mortgage, we here, our group, in Minnesota, across the entire nation, we have probably one of the most, like, bond programs and different programs that are out there. I mean,
mm-hmm.
there's new ones coming up all the time. I have one right now. Shoreview's got one that's like up to $30,000.
That's amazing.
Right.
Awesome.
So
Might be
see,
worth buying in Shoreview if you're open to location.
right.
So,
Yes. So I specifically had, when that came up, I had a client, she's in that area. I'm like, well, would you like Shoreview?
mm-hmm,
Because there's different ones. Minnesota housing is going to carry a little bit higher interest rate.
mm-hmm,
So we were going to go down that road, but we could do this one. And even though the income was higher than their deferred program, the cost for that payment on that 30,000 was less than the monthly payment loan for the Minnesota housing,
wow,
and it was twice the amount of money.
amazing.
So the cost is way lower. And, like,
Mm-hmm,
she said, well, I'm absolutely going to find something in Shoreview, and sure enough, we did in like 2 days.
mm-hmm,
So things worked very well like that. Um, Marketing homes in today's market,
mm-hmm.
how fun is that? Like, what is, like, your number one go-to when you're talking to people about marketing their home?
So I think the bar has really been raised in the last few years as far as what the expectations are for people's, and probably rightfully so. So the things that used to be only reserved for the highest luxury homes are standard. You need to have professional photography. You need to have the home show beautifully. Professional staging on most listings is a must. Um, just because the old adage, you only get one chance to make a first impression. But also your buyers are shopping for homes, they're comparing everything that's on the market. So when every listing comes up and it looks beautiful and you know tells a great story about the home and all of these things, then that you need to do that too. So
Right,
so I
right.
mean, those are just kind of, I mean, so the many things have been true and they still are, where it's necessary to price it correctly. Look at what else. I always tell people I'm looking at the same things appraisers are looking for. So I mean, technically the price of a home is what a seller is willing to take and a buyer is willing to pay, and what it will appraise for.
Right.
And so so that pricing is a big thing. making sure that it's going to be in line with the other things that are on the market and things
Correct.
that have sold recently.
Right.
So
That's where I see so many times that some people fail, or some agents. And a lot of times it's not necessarily the agent. It's just what the seller is like. I think my house is worth X.
mhm.
And how do you come over, or like, it sounds like you can come into this, you've done this a lot, so you can
Mhm.
come into this situation and be like, here's what these other homes that are just like yours, your
Mhm.
style comparables,
Mhm.
and that's where I think where a lot of that gets missed.
Right. Absolutely. The data is out there. And so it's looking at that. And I think one of the most fun things about working with people who are buying and selling at the same time is that they get to be buyers and sellers at the same time. And so, when you are a buyer, you look at the things that need to happen on a house and you always overestimate what it's going to cost.
Right.
And sellers always underestimate what it's going to cost, or like the buyers think an inspection item comes up as such a big deal, but a seller is like, that's
Right.
never bothered me.
Right.
So to be on both sides of it at the same time is really good.
Right.
But yeah, so giving them the information, showing them, here, based on what other things have sold, this is how long they took, this is where they priced. You can see the progression of them having to drop the price. I think people are understanding it now. It seems sort of counterintuitive, but sometimes homes are truly priced to sell and they're priced under market value. And so that you get a bidding war. And so, you can raise the price because it's such a good listing. We're still in a very low inventory market.
Right.
So you can price aggressively, and there are still homes selling for more than 100% of their asking price when they show super well and they're priced really well.
Right. And that's where, I always was of that belief, is that, depending on a couple different situations, but, if you really want to get that house sold and moved right away, and if you are in that situation where it's that you can buy before you sell, so then you can stage it and you can put it all perfectly together, and then you can have that open house that weekend, kind of, coming soon, whatnot. I've seen a lot of people buying like, okay, it's coming soon, it's so when is it going to go on? And, you create that rush. And then, I've had other people on both sides where, okay, you have a house to sell, so they're going to sell, they're going to, like, they're trying to buy first, but before they sell, but then they're also, they're making ridiculous offers, and then they're losing. And it's like, okay, so when you see somebody come in and you're going to come in 50,000 under list price on their house, what are you going to do when that is flipped? They're going to do the same thing for you. Well, I wouldn't do that. Okay. So then you can get them to come back around a little bit.
Yeah.
But
I think when you're looking at the whole entire picture, so at the end of the day, yes, every seller wants to get the most money that they can for their home. They want to know they're not leaving money on the table, but at the same time, they want to buy well on the next one. So if you work backwards and figure out, what does the monthly payment need to be on the next one? What kind of property does that need to be? What are the dream things, but then what are the practical aspects of that? How are we going to utilize this equity that we have in order to get you a better loan the next one? And they all go together.
Right.
They're not really separate things. And so if you had to take less over here on your sell side, but it saved you 2 months of payments, then that gets you on your buy side into a better payment structure because you've been able to win that offer. And so, yeah.
That's a very, very good strategy for people to understand, right? Because and a lot of times too is like, well, how long you plan on living in this next house? Forever home again. But if it's going to be a long-term home, and the bidding war is like, well, I don't want to spend too much, but is this the right house? If this is the right house, does it matter if you maybe you're $5,000 more than the next person to get it? But you're going to be there for 7, 8, 10 plus years. I mean, that.
Yeah, the other thing is too, people think about price, but they forget the cost of financing or how much flexibility you have with changing that in the future. So, I mean, one of the things that has been a strong selling point for many mortgage companies right now is hey, we're going to refinance for you, and we're not going to charge you fees when the rates go down,
Right.
or
Right.
make that affordable.
Right.
So a lot of people, even just the simplest people have been in their homes for a while. They have a bunch of equity. They got into a 30-year mortgage, as everybody does. It's so interesting to look at the difference between the 20-year mortgage and the 30-year mortgage and how much you would save. I did this exercise for somebody recently, and it was like, okay, they could refinance out of their 30 into a 20 and have the exact same payment. It was down to like $2 or something, but they would save $200,000 over the life of the loan.
Correct. Well, that's my favorite thing to do when somebody wants to refinance, right? Unless they're truly looking for, I need to lower my payment, right? If it's, hey, are you comfortable with this payment or even higher? We can save you once you show somebody on paper like a 15-year or 20-year, you're 3 years into your 30-year, you got 27, we're gonna knock 7 years off of it, and your payment's still going down 100. But if we go to 15, your payment's gonna go up a couple $100. And, I'm looking at it from the DTI side. So I'm like, as long as we're not pushing 50, DTIs, and you show them like, I can literally save you, $300,000-$400,000 on a $500,000 loan, right? And it's huge money.
That's better than saving $10,000 on the offer that you made and the price
right
when you got that home in the first place. And a lot of the things, going back to what we were talking about with like the rate buy downs, people can do that on both sides. I think as a seller, you can compete with new construction builders by offering that as an incentive, by upfront saying, hey, we'll buy down your rate 2%. We'll do this 2-1 buy down. And then when you're making an offer, instead of asking the sellers to pay closing costs, or that is a closing cost, I guess, but asking them to pay for that buy down and structure that into, sometimes it works out better to raise the purchase price in order to incorporate that buy down, and you still wind up getting a lower monthly payment and saving money over time, not paying more money for a more expensive home. So.
Right. Next segment, college housing strategy. So this is one of my favorite things ever too, is when parents are at the age, their kids are going to school and they're looking at rent for their kids, or, and maybe it's the kids like, I can buy a house now, I'm 3 years into college, whatever, but that, buying a home for your kids and put them on that home and then have their roommates pay for that home. Like, it's amazing.
It's amazing. I love it. It's
5% down.
I think.
Minimal down. Get them in.
I actually had, So there's so many different, financing where you could finance the whole thing easily. There's the FHA where parents can co-sign and the kids can be on the loan, type of thing. I had a client recently who did this and actually has lived in their primary home. They've lived in their primary home for a long time. So they were able to take a home equity line and then buy the college home for cash. Yeah. That worked out even better.
Right.
But you start looking at, what are we paying? Many parents are paying, or whether the kids are paying, the parents are paying, but college housing, you're paying to live in a house, to live in a dorm, X number of dollars. So in this, it's fresh in my mind because it was just recent. But the daughter had 3 other roommates that she was living with, and they each were paying a few $100s of rent. They were all 4 paying a few $100s of rent. So mom says, why don't we buy the house? And then those 3 can still pay rent. Their rent didn't go up at all. They paid the same amount of rent. They were super happy. It was still the same 4 roommates living together. But now parents have this appreciating asset. They actually were excited to improve it too. So all the girls are doing renovations and, they're painting the walls and refinishing the floors, and they were updating the bathroom. And so
life skills. Awesome. That's fantastic to hear. I know I have a couple of friends that, I didn't go down this road. I wish I would have, right? And hindsight 2020 is always the case. But I have one friend that he's a real estate agent now for Keller Williams, and he did that. His dad helped him get his first duplex, and then next thing you know, he's got a 4-plex. And next thing you know, he's got 3 4-plexes on campus, right? And he's in his 20s.
It's fantastic. Right? I know. I'm gonna
like the amount of wealth he built for himself in his 20s, and he's now in his 40s, but just in that period of time, by the time he sold them all in his 30s and bought other properties, but that was his way, like, and then he's like, why don't I just do real estate full time?
Yes.
And that's how he got into it and whatnot. But it's amazing what you can do. And, you know, if parents are able to do that, to help their children along to do that, it's there, it sets them up so much further down the road.
Absolutely. And then it's not just dependent. Parents in general have been spending time setting up college accounts and retirement accounts and saving and what do we like this is a legitimate strategy that really exponentially creates that generational wealth, helps the next generation to
100%.
get up and running.
100%. I mean, it's, you know, I can't remember when the study was, but it was, you know, just that first car that's paid for by the parents versus the child having to take it out.
Yeah.
I had to purchase my own stuff. It is what it is.
Yep.
But you know, it was a lot affordable. It was more affordable back then.
Yes.
And I had been working since I was like 13, so like whatever.
Yep.
But today to buy a used car is ridiculously expensive. So like, okay, well, I can't go work at McDonald's anymore and part-time and then buy a $10,000 car, like, you know, cash, right? It's hard to do that. Whereas because the cost of those things have gone up. But if you're able to do that, or you're able to help that first home, you know, just that 5% down, and then literally it's 5% down. If we can get there, and we can get their friends to pay the rent, and then that's an appreciating asset, and it's just it's so huge. So one of my favorite hacking skills hacking strategies for parents and their children going to college.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things too, you mentioned, like, if the parents can help. Well, even if the parents can't and it's on the kid, buying a rental property in college towns, there are a lot of homes or duplexes or fourplexes that have been used for this purpose. So if you have a history of rent, that rent can count as revenue for qualifying. Isn't
Correct.
it usually 75% of rent counts for qualifying income?
Yeah.
So if you have, you know, leases already in place, leases already lined up, there's a history of leases in that property. There's different ways to go about it. But
Yeah. So
you can qualify.
from the lending side, it's pretty easy,
Okay.
right? So you're first of all, you're going to get an appraisal with a rent schedule on it. We don't care about the leases. We care about that rent schedule.
Okay.
You know, we can use a down payment assistance program. So as long as you have that ability to meet those criteria, you know, a lot of times, a lot of students are working a job, going to school. Their schooling can count as history towards their job overall.
Okay.
So job time, because you have to have 2 years job time. So let's say you're in the medical field, right? And you're going to school, you got your first nursing degree or whatever, and you're like going for RN or whatever. We can use that history along with a lot of times they're going to be working at a hospital, right? So now they have that. Then we get the down payment assistance. We can meet that. Let's say the rents on a 2-unit or a 3 or 4 unit is going to be, let's say, $3,000. You can use 75% of that as income. Along with your income, now it supports the payment on it. So yes, many people are able to do it. So you're not wrong. Many people are able to do it on their own without parents' help. If you know what if you know what you're doing, and then you get into that. Okay, let's say you only have a year left of school. You rent that for that year, and then you can maybe move on, but you can keep that house and keep renting it out.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and you have that asset. And so I've recently ran into a new client of mine. He's on his 3rd duplex in 3 years.
Awesome.
And he's young, right? And
Yep.
he's like, I'm gonna move every year because I can buy the next one with 5% down. And it gets to a point where it doesn't work because now there's too much income to do the 5% down.
Sure.
But it works, and you know, we can thread that needle a little bit sometimes.
And there's a
make it
new
work.
formula. Making too much money for something is usually a fun problem to solve, you know,
Right.
as far as financing and purchasing real estate. So
Right. Last, what are the biggest mistakes in today's market?
I think just being reactive instead of being proactive.
Correct.
Just people waiting for something, some outside force to happen. And I think people aren't necessarily even clear on what it is that they're waiting for.
Well, my probably best example right now for it is people saying, waiting for rates to get better. Well, do we know if rates are going to get better?
Nope.
Right. I guarantee the last 3 years of all the people that said rates are going to be in the fives, we were there.
Yep.
And then a war started.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it doesn't look like we're going to get there anytime soon. Mm-hmm. Like it might be we're the lowest right now that we see over the next 3 years. Sure. And I might have been preaching for the last 2 years saying, hey, rates are going to go lower. Right. Because that's what all the economists are saying. And they're not right because there's so many other outside sources that affect the market from an interest rate perspective. Also the housing market, and people are like, oh, it's going to crash. It's going to do this. There's certain places it has. Sure. Because there was all the people in COVID that moved to Texas and Florida and like all these places, Airbnbs, second homes, all these different places. And guess what? Now companies said you can't live remote. You got to be in here 3 times a week. Well, now we got to get rid of that second home, or Airbnb isn't working out as well. And they've got all these Airbnb. And so everybody's trying to sell. Right. So they created these different markets, and those markets aren't doing well. But I can say that Minnesota's market's different.
It is.
For sure. So any of our Minnesota people here, definitely don't wait for that. I always point back, and I've said it numerous times, like 2008 crash, there was 23,000 homes on the market at the time.
Incredible.
And then when it crashed, it went to 33,000. Okay. Right?
Yep.
And we're probably still sitting around 10,000 now, right? I haven't looked at this most recent stats lately, but think of that. It's a third. Right. So the inventory, and there's more people here, period. Right. So it's still an inventory part. People are waiting, in my opinion, for the wrong reasons. At the same time, you're looking at every year. I mean, they just came out again. Redfin and Zillow both came out and said we're probably looking at 3.5 at the minimum on the low side appreciation to like over 5. And again, that's where we're at, right? So waiting is not necessarily the best.
Well, and I always like to take and just extrapolate, well, what's the worst case scenario? So like when you're purchasing something, so if you buy right now and the market crashes, like if that's a fear for people, which I also agree. I'm not worried about that in our market. I think we have just way too much diversity of industry, all these Fortune 500 companies, there's people moving in, there's just a lot of factors. But say the worst case scenario is your home value goes down and you need to sell, but you can't sell for what you bought it for. Well, can you rent it? Could you, because again, that 75% of that revenue is going to count for income. The person that you put in can pay that mortgage while you get a mortgage someplace else. Rates are something that you can change. Like if you get into a house now, the prices, they're not going up as much as they used to, but they're still they're just going up a little bit. And there's low inventory, so you have competition, all that. But if you get into a house now and the rates do go down, you can refinance. You're not locked into that for any amount of time.
Correct. And over time, what has everything? There's only been a couple times in history where there's been more than 1 year of rates or your value going down.
Right. It just doesn't happen over the long time or all of that. So, I mean, when I'm working with people looking to buy things, if they're buying something that's too crazy, I'm like, okay, what happens when you need to sell again? If these are the obstacles for that. Right. So, but could you sell it again? Could you rent it again? Could you whatever? Then there's nothing to worry about.
Right. Exactly. Well, Leslie, I want to thank you for coming on. This has been a very educational, very good podcast, and all the people out there. Please like and subscribe. But more importantly, if you have any questions, if you're looking at selling and buying, I have the perfect realtor right here, Leslie Dahlen. Thank you much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. It was great.
Awesome.
Yes.